Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on best practices to extend the life of your fire sprinkler system. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the editor-in-chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and the webinar is presented today by Agf Manufacturing. Before we get started, I would like to cover just a few housekeeping items with you. Please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions in the question box in that panel. You can send your questions in for the speaker at any time, and they will be addressed after the presentation. Please note the orange arrow on the left side of that control panel. Clicking on that will either expand or collapse it, so please be sure it is expanded so you can access the question box. Also, if at any time you experience a technical difficulty or have a non-content related question, you can send a message to us in that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Also, if you're interested in a continuing education credit, you'll receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive after this webinar, and you can report that to your association for the CEU. Now we'll turn to the content, and I'd like to introduce your speaker today, Jim Mchugh. Jim is president of Agf Manufacturing, and he and his family have been involved in the fire sprinkler industry since the founding of Agf and the introduction of the Agf test and drain valve. As the president of the company, Jim's responsible for the development, introduction, and manufacture of specialized valves and the unique products designed for the fire sprinkler industry from the company. He's a member of NFSA, NFPA, SFPE, ASPE, and AFSA, and he serves on the membership committee for NFSA and the Manufacturers Suppliers Council for AFSA. And Jim's committed to continuing Agf's tradition of service to the industry, which began with his father, George Mchugh III. So we look forward to Jim's presentation today on fire systems and, of course, to your questions toward the end, where we'll have some Q&A. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll welcome Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Ann, and I want to thank all the members at Facility Executive Magazine and especially Group C Media. Ann Cosgrove and her staff, along with Neil Eisenberg, have been very helpful in putting this presentation together. My hope is that the various attendees that are listening in will learn something from this. I'm going to be going over code references that are going to be talking about NFPA 13 and NFPA 25 that are the requirements for all fire sprinkler systems located in your facilities. And it doesn't matter if, what your facility is, if it's just strictly an office building, or maybe it's a corporate campus, maybe it's an industrial building. NFPA 13 and NFPA 25 are kind of the Bibles of the fire sprinkler industry. So this presentation is going to be highlighting some of the aspects of that. And we're going to be covering both wet and dry systems. Certainly everyone is familiar with what happened in Texas a few months ago, and that was a climate that was not used to such freezing environments, and where they had dry systems, they encountered a lot of problems. We're going to be addressing some of the aspects that caused that problem and how you can address that in your own facilities. Like Ann had said, and I just want to reiterate this, at any time, as I am going through the presentation, if a question comes up or a comment, a thought, or really anything, I encourage you to click on your toolbar and click on the chat function, or the questions function, and submit a question or a comment or thought or anything you have about any of the topics as I'm talking about them. There are members of Facility Executive Magazine, as well as staff members from Agf Manufacturing, there to look at those questions. And in addition to that, Ann and I will be reviewing those questions at the end of my presentation. So getting it started here, I just think to give a very quick frame of reference of who Agf Manufacturing is. Many people have our products. In fact, if you have a fire sprinkler system built in the last 30 years, then you have some of my family's products in your building. But we are a family business, as I said. We are just outside downtown Philadelphia. So we're out in the suburbs of Philadelphia is where our main headquarters are. The products are manufactured in different facilities around the United States and both internationally and domestically. And products are of course sold throughout the world. We're very proud, though, about being a U.S. manufacturer. That's something, the majority of the various products that we make, the majority of them are all made here in the domestic U.S. and then exported around the world. And the two governing bodies for products that are installed in your buildings are Underwriters Laboratory, known as UL, or Factory Mutual, known as FM. And we kind of centralize all of our products are both UL certified and FM approved. So that's another thing we're very proud of, that we're a highly regulated, audited facility, and very proud of the fact that we comply with all of the standards of our industry. For those of you who are, again, AGF isn't certainly rolling off the tongue as a family familiar name, but the different products we make range from the test and drain valves, which if you go into the stairwells of almost any multi-story building built in the last 30 years around the world that has a fire sprinkler system, you would see these red-handled valves that say inspectors test on them, or main drain, or auxiliary drain, things like that. And my family is the one that makes a lot of these products. And so from the test and drains to our air vents to collect and drains to riser packs, these are some of the different product lines that we manufacture. Like I had mentioned just a few seconds ago, I'm going to be making specific code references to NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 13 and NFPA 25. And these two documents are what are the guiding light for the design and installation and maintenance of fire sprinkler systems. Let's first get into what's involved with freeze protection of your building. And most of the country's now starting to, emerge from freezing conditions, and everyone's enjoying a nice spring. Here, I'm just outside Philadelphia. We're in the high 50s, low 60s today. But just a few months ago, as we all saw on the national news, areas in the Texas, Oklahoma market and throughout the Southeast were racked with cold temperatures. And fire sprinkler systems, the majority of fire sprinklers are wet sprinkler systems, which means they're full of water. And guys, I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm going to say the word water. Sorry, water if for the Midwest and the rest of the country. But in some systems where you can't have a system full of water, you have it full of compressed air or nitrogen. These are called dry or pre-action systems. And why you have to put those in, code requires that if you can't maintain reliability of a 40 degrees or greater in that building, you have to put in what's a dry pipe system. Since that system doesn't have any water in it in its usual state, you have to accommodate for if any water gets into it. This could be through condensation in the air. We all know there's water molecules in the air, and that air can carry, and what we're worried about is those water molecules freezing and locating anywhere near a sprinkler head, or accumulating and freezing and breaking pipe. So you have to have accommodations to collect any moisture in a dry or pre-action system, and they make these products called auxiliary drains. And they're very simple devices. The idea behind a dry system is the majority of the system is pitched back to supply, but in the areas that you would have trapped sections, you have to have these auxiliary drains to collect any accumulation of moisture. And again, like I said, very simple. Two valves, reducer, and a 1 foot piece of 2-inch pipe, and then periodically someone goes along. First, of course, before there's any type of freezing condition, someone would go along and drain out any accumulated moisture out of these units. And one of the unique things, and this is something that was an issue in Texas, just because they were surprised, there is a requirement that if you have a dry or a pre-action system in your building, on the general information sign that is located at each of your dry valves, there is supposed to be some indication of the quantity and location of each of these low point drains. Because in the event someone doesn't know where one of these is located in the building, and then that building is subjected to some very brief amount of freezing temperatures, that accumulated moisture, and it may freeze and crack, and then it releases the air that's under pressure in the system, and water comes rushing in, or could have a catastrophic issue where the system freezes and breaks and causes extensive water damage. And that's really what we saw in the Texas problem. You had just dozens and dozens of systems in buildings that had traditionally not been subjected to freezing temperatures, so they were surprised by that. And you had an issue where no one had gone around and checked the low point drains to get out any accumulated moisture. And sometimes they didn't even know that they had these low point drains in the building. So when people say, well, they freeze and break, we try and explain to people, it's actually they freeze, they thaw, and then when they freeze again is what causes all the problem. It's when the units freeze and then when they thaw, that ice floating in the thawed water freezes again, and due to the hydraulic pressure of the expansion, when the ice freezes, it either ruptures the seam on the pipe or possibly cracks the reducer, or it may have so much force that it actually blows apart the valve at the bottom of the unit. And as you can imagine, and some of these people on this call or on this webinar may actually be victims of this. This can be a very costly problem. These can cost thousands of dollars worth of damage. Nobody wants to see an impaired life safety system. That's first and foremost. But even more so than that is just one of these very simple devices breaking can lead to thousands of dollars in both service and repair work or water damage claim. I mean, water damage claims can be up in the tens of thousands, let alone just a few thousand, just to fix the simple product. In some instances, and this is something we're seeing growing, when these units freeze and break, or they have small cracks in them and they cause air leaks, well, that in turn can trip the system, which may alert the fire department. You get false alarms. So there really isn't a fire event, but the fire companies have to respond. And if that happens due to lack of maintenance on the system, you start to hear about fines being levied on building owners and building management companies for false alarms on their systems. And again, no one wants to waste time there. When you go into buildings, this is what we will typically see. And I show you these pictures, and again, hopefully you're on the webinar here where you can see the screen versus on a telephone. But I show these pictures from when I was making this presentation at a facility here in the Northeast and just outside Philadelphia. These were taken from the actual building I was making the presentation in. So in this case, what we're concerned about with these low point drains is people either put impairments around them, or they possibly impair the product by removing handles to prevent people from vandalizing the units, or they try and lock and insulate them without proper, say, technique on how to do that, or they leave them in open areas. These units may be assembled through a variety of wrong installed parts, and all of that leads to why we introduced the collect and drain product line. And it starts first and foremost with our model 5300. So like you saw in the NFPA 13 code drawing, here we're providing a factory built and tested 2 valves, 2 reducers, and a 1-foot piece of 2-inch pipe, exactly how code requires it. And we added in the required necessary signage so that these things are bright red. They've got this vinyl wrap around them so you know where they are. And this is just a great thing for contractors so that they didn't have to worry about building these units in the field. They can get this product right out of the box. But one of the areas that we focused on when we talked to contractors about what was the ongoing problems with low point drains, they said it was twofold. And the first one was people either vandalizing the systems because they would be rotating the valve handles on the units, not knowing that they are potentially impairing a system. Again, speaking specific into the Philadelphia area, but if you guys have ever been to stadiums, you'll see a lot of these in stadium environments. And I've been to ballparks and seen people just turning the valve handles while they're waiting to get a beer. So the first request from the commercial sector was, could we make these units lockable and prevent somebody from inadvertently activating the lower valve, which would dump the air out of the system? So we introduced the model 5200A, and this plate utilizes the handle at the top pushing down against the handle at the bottom so that the valves can't be done out of sequence. Then the second problem that we addressed, again, talking with building owners all over the country, was, well, we're not exactly sure which low point has water in it. We don't know exactly where all these valves are. Maybe they're in a loud parking garage. Maybe they're in an industrial environment. Maybe they're in a residential community environment. They're worried about obstructions around them. So we introduced the model 5100 ALBV, and the ball valve here that's at the bottom, located on the bottom of the valve of a low point drain, well, it will chirp and blink locally. It's got a little speaker and it's got a little blinking LED light. So it will chirp and blink to tell you that this is the low point drain and it is accumulated water and needs to be emptied. So again, thinking back to what happened in Texas, here's an environment where the person could say, hey, this thing's chirping and blinking like the low battery alarm on a smoke detector. I better go get the moisture out of this because the temperature's starting to plummet. Now, it also has dry contact, so it can be wired back to a fire alarm panel to send a trouble signal. It can also be integrated into a building management system so that it would indicate on the building management system which low point drains needed to be emptied. And it has the unique feature, again, taking industry comments, it can be powered from a simple 9-volt battery, or it can use the low voltage alarm loop wiring, or it can even be plugged into a local lighting connection. So each unit comes with an onboard thermostat, and that what happens is once it senses the temperature drops below approximately 40 degrees, and if that low point drain has water in it, then it will start to chirp and blink and tell you to come empty it. So this has really been a critical device component for all dry and pre-action systems to prevent problems. You can get that by itself, or you can get it as part of a larger assembly. And it looks like my screen has locked up. Neil, we thought this is, oh, here he goes. Sorry, jump ahead here. So I've got to go back a few slides. I apologize. It's just taking a minute to respond. So with the units that we've talked about, one of the things in NFPA 13 code talks about is heat protecting your low point drains to prevent them from freezing and breaking, because it is just that much of a known problem. So we introduced the model 5400A. It's a heated low point drain. It comes in a heavily insulated heated cabinet that is lockable. All units come key alike. It has the same feature of a chirping and blinking alarm once the unit is approximately 80% full. It uses a float switch. So in this case environment, we've brought a heated environment to the low point drain so that they can't freeze and break. It also comes with dry contact, so it can alert to your building management system or to your fire alarm that the low point drain is now full. And it may take years for that unit to fill up. So you're saving a lot of time and aggravation going around and checking the low point drains all winter long by just having a simple cabinet. And the next evolution past that we introduced this year, and we've had great success with it, especially after what happened in Texas. We had customers come in and say, I wish that you guys would just make a unit that would drain itself. And we were challenged with two ways of doing it, a mechanical way of doing it and an electronic way. So starting with the mechanical version, we created we call it self-maintaining low point drain. And this uses the same heavily insulated heated cabinet as our standard 5400. But what this does in addition to that, it has a diversion at the top of the unit that when it gets to approximately 80% full, any water that drips in after that amount goes through a auxiliary second drain, and we have this thing called the drain drip. And so to think about it is for every additional drip into the unit, a drip drops out of the unit. So it always maintains its air integrity above it, but when you have that very small, slow amount of condensation water dripping into these units, once it gets to that diversion, every drip in is a drip out. So in the event if there was a system trip and the system was filled full of water, then the float switch would activate. It would tell you that the thing is completely full and needs to be emptied. But in its normal state, it will just drip out the water that accumulates in the system. So then our last evolution, our most is a fully electronic self-draining low point drain. And this one offers a variety of features such as semi-automatic mode, so it can be initiated for draining by just simply pushing a button. It can be put into full automatic mode, and so when the unit senses it's nearly full, it will close itself off from the system to maintain system air integrity. And then once it senses that it is closed, it will then open its bottom drain all of the accumulated water out. Once it senses it's empty, it will then reset itself. This has been very popular in facilities, and all three of these units have been very popular in facilities that like residential facilities that have underground parking, or retail, some of the larger big box stores that have underground parking, or they may have 2 levels of parking and then their store is above the item. So the parking garages are exposed to the elements below the stores. We also see these installed in manufacturing and industrial facilities, and where we've got one customer who has a headquarters in Atlanta, and they are able to send a signal to all of these around at their different facilities, regardless of what state they're in, and they, on their schedule, can initiate draining of their low point drain. So this offers far and away the greatest level of protection and flexibility. The most recent addition to the collect and drain line, which would have been perfect had it been available for this in Texas, but it wasn't. It's a product we just introduced called the Model 5900 Flood Eliminator. And how this unit works is this is installed above each and every one of your low point drains. And if it senses a drop in the pressure because you've had a freeze and a break, or you've had some issue going on that low point drain, so if there's a drop in pressure below the unit and the water velocity of water coming into the unit, it closes off at the top valve. And it still allows a small amount of water, approximately 8 ounces a minute, will drip out of the unit so that you know it needs to be fixed downstream of it. But this would prevent that catastrophic flooding like we saw happen all over the place in Florida, Oklahoma, Tennessee, even as far as Alabama and the north of Florida, Georgia, where systems were freezing and breaking and flooding out. And when you have a 1-inch valve, you could be pushing 25, 30 gallons a minute. We reduced that down to 8 ounces with this device. So that's called our Model 5900 Flood Eliminator. Now I'm going to jump into corrosion, which is really one of the single biggest expenses on both wet and dry systems. And if we focus first on corrosion on wet systems, we're going to, and I don't think I need to go into too much of the science side of corrosion, but certainly if anyone has ever left their bicycle outside and they understand that if you put water and air or oxygen and steel together, you're going to get rust. You're going to get this oxygen-based corrosion. And what we're concerned about in the fire sprinkler industry is that corrosion can impair the life safety system. It could reduce the inside diameter, like you see in the picture, where you've got this great reduction in the diameter of the flow path of the pipe. It could cause catastrophic failure on the piping. You could have joints fail. And again, you could also have life safety issues that the water can't actually physically get to the sprinkler heads to put the fire out, and then you have even the chance of life safety issues. So corrosion is an extremely important topic in the fire sprinkler industry. It has been for the last, it's kind of been our #1 topic for the last several years on how to deal with corrosion and the effects corrosion has. And when we say effects, some people think, well, how do I know if my pipe's corrosion? It could be as simple as just seeing a pinhole leak. That certainly is a sign of the pipe has had a major corrosion failure event, to catastrophic failure like I described. And what we're seeing in the industry is that fire sprinkler pipe is not lasting as long as we had initially thought. It could be an issue with people using thinner and thinner pipe to do jobs. It could be a variety of issues, but a long-term study was done, and we're seeing that about 35% of wet systems are failing within the first 25 years of their life. So that's certainly a concern. And all of this is cost. So there's safety cost, there's monitoring. You may have to have fire watch if you have a corrosion related issue on your system. There's pipe replacement costs, there's downtime, there's tenant interruption, there could possibly be insurance claim level if there's water damage issues. All of these things are costs. One of the large big box retailers actually now tracks the cost of corrosion on their publicly available 10K reports. They have the cost of service and repair on life safety systems, and that's code speak for corrosion related problem. So we know that if we can get air out of a wet system, we can cut down on corrosion. The same way, if we can get water out of a dry system, we cut down on corrosion. We're reducing one of those three. If we can reduce the air, the steel, or the water, then we have an issue of affecting corrosion. So starting with how to get trapped air out of a system, Factory Mutual, one of the best insurance group of insurance underwriters for commercial properties. Well, they did a long-term study first concerned on Mchugh corrosion in sprinkler systems, and they came back and said that they felt Mchugh was responsible for 10 to 20%. Well, if that's the case, then the other corrosion, 80 to 90%, is being caused by oxygen-related corrosion. So let's do whatever we can do to get air out of a system. The industry started to address this in NFPA code changes, first by allowing the remote inspectors test, which was there to test all the bells and whistles of a sprinkler system, where it used to be recommended to be put at the farthest point of a system. They were allowing it to be relocated back to the inlet of a system, so you would not introduce more new oxygen into the system. And then from the 2007 language, they first made mention in 2010 and then repeated again in 2013, the idea that have some type of air venting protocol on your system. And in 2010 is when they introduced the suggested language that you have a manual or automatic air vent to reduce the amount of air in a wet sprinkler system. Well, as we all know, it takes many, many, many years to get into code cycle, and probably 10 years from when language is suggested. So what was recommended in 2007 and then suggested in 2010 and 13 became mandated in 2016, again, almost 10 years later. So in 2016, they introduced language that said, and I hate reading slides here, but the language says, a single air vent with a connection conforming to 816.6 shall be provided on each wet pipe sprinkler system utilizing metallic pipe. What that means is all wet systems that have steel pipe in it have to have an air vent on them. Each and every wet pipe, and it says shall, not should, it's shall, which means you have to do it. And that single air vent per system shall be located near a high point of the building, and that it can be constructed as either the simplicity of just a half-inch valve, or it can be an automatic air vent or other means. So if we dive into what is implied with this, first and foremost, as I typically have someone, if this was a live presentation, I would have somebody raising their hand saying, well, I can't get all the air out of the system. We know you can't get all the air out. We want to have some amount of air in a wet system to handle thermal expansion. But the goal is to try and get out as much air as possible to cut down on corrosion. That's the goal. And in addition to the changes in 2016, they also cleaned up what is the definition of a sprinkler system. So for those that have multi-story buildings, the concern is that initially some people would say, well, I saw a backflow preventer and alarm valve, and I've got a 4 or 5 story building, that's one system. But now that you've got individual control valves and individual check valves on each and every floor, and the definition of a system has been, to paraphrase it, that if you can control the water, sense flow of water, and drain the water, that's a system. You could have an authority saying that they want an air vent on each and every floor. So you have to be cautious about how you're interpreting what is a system and how many air vents you should and shouldn't have on a system. The two important shalls, and this is for all building owners and engineers, you need to have a single air vent per system, and that single air vent shall be located near a high point in the system. There's of course some common sense shoulds. You should put it where it will be most effective. That's common sense. You should locate it off the top of a horizontal pipe. Why? Because if you feed it from the side of a pipe, or in the worst case, from an arm under arrangement, feeding it from the bottom of the pipe, well, then you are impairing the air vent from having access to the most accumulated air to get it out. So you always want to make sure they are fed from the top of the pipe. If you utilize a manual air vent, you should make sure that you know where it is and that it's accessible. If you're utilizing an automatic air vent, because automatic air vents are required to have strainers, and NFPA 25 mandates that any strainer on the system be inspected. So you want to avoid putting them above drop ceilings because you sometimes lose where they are. And then each and every time you service the system, you want to make sure, especially if you're using a manual air vent, that you utilize the air vent to get any new air out. And now, what's not required? And I spent a lot of time talking to building owner and manager associations about what they don't have to do. They don't have to put in any additional pipe or discharge lines off of an air vent. They're not required to run separate drain lines. Number two, you're not required to have it at a specific distance to the floor. Like you can't say, we'll put it at the highest point in the system. The problem is if you put the word highest, that's why the code says near a high point, not highest. Highest may be a poor location for it. It could be very inconvenient to get to. It could be just a bad area for the unit to work effectively. And then last, you're not required to perform any discharge calculation to know how much air you've gotten out versus how much water you've let in. There is no direct percentage of air volume to water volume calculation that you're required to do. Most of the country now requires these air vents, even in the areas that may not yet require it as on a state level. The large customers in that, the large retail and distribution center customers nationally are requiring it in all of their buildings because they certainly have learned the direct effect of corrosion. So even if your state is not requiring it, it is still recommended that you put these in. NFPA 13 in 2019 added an option of the remote inspector's test valve. I bring that up as a caution that it's something that's being addressed because it caused a conflict that in one section of the same code, in the same chapter, they say that you should move the remote inspector's test to the supply because a remote inspector's test will let in new air. Well, then it doesn't make much sense that the remote inspector's test would also let out the air. So that was just a poor choice of how they located and worded this allowance. Typically, inspectors' test valves make extremely poor combination air vents because the inspector's test valves could be located at or near the inbound supply, or they're also often combined with express drains, so they're fed from the bottom of the pipe, again, not off the top of the pipe. Or if they are used in a remote inspector's test location, very rarely is that fed from the top of the pipe. So the water systems fill like a pool. Once the water drops down to that drain valve, it's trapping all the air above it. Again, where these things are recommended to be installed is near a high point in the system. You only need one per system. You could put gang vents in where you have tying all of your branch lines into one to remove the most air. That's off of an FM drawing, not a requirement. In NFPA 25, there's actually new language so not many jurisdictions are on this yet, certainly, but this is what's coming. You will actually be required to perform some form of inspection and cleaning process of all air vents on your system. So let's go to what Agf manufactures. So first and foremost, the first choice in the code was that you could have our model 7910. It's a manual air vent. This really is, although we call it a manual air vent, it's much more like a semi-automatic air vent. It utilizes a Teflon float ball in it that's between the inlet of the valve and the ball that seals it. So that ball would bounce around like you'd see inside the ball inside of a sports whistle, and it would let all the air out until water comes up underneath it, and then the water is going to push the Teflon ball up into the main ball of the valve and seal it closed. So it's kind of semi-automatic in that it won't gush out water once water comes up to the unit, and then the unit can be operated to let out any residual air. We typically see these put on the top of the pipe at far ends of systems. The one that gets the most attention is actually the Agf model 7900 AAV, our automatic air vent, which is really a marriage of two valves. So we talk about the first valve at the bottom, 1, 2, 3. It incorporates a 1-inch full port isolation valve in case you ever have to service or inspect these units. It utilizes a barrel strainer, so the whole body of the valve is a strainer, so that protects the air vent mechanism located above it. And then we have the garden hose cap and chain purge valve. This allows you to to both flush out the strainer by NFPA 25 requirement. It also allows you to do a rapid air purge or rapid air inlet if you're draining systems very quickly. And then this valve feeds up to the 7900A air vent. This conical shaped unique air vent has a float mechanism inside it that the unique feature of this thing is the bottom of it. We call it the bubble breaker. And the propeller-like device here that you see has slits in it that takes the large air volume and breaks it into smaller air bubbles that go around our float mechanism. And once water comes up underneath our sealed chamber here and pushes up on that housing, that pulls down on a linkage in the center of our unit, which closes off the air vent. So we don't have any type of dripping or spitting of water or moisture in our device. We typically see these again located at the end of lines or at the top of risers. Now, specifically for distribution centers, we had one very large contractor that was doing distribution centers around the whole country. And when you're doing large distribution centers, you have to be careful about the ceiling spacing from the top of the pipe to the bottom of the roof deck. So we created the model 7930 end cap, and this allows for the installed height of the product to be below 5 inches, which keeps it well within the ESFR requirements for distribution center sprinkler heads. So it's far and away the most compact device out on the market. And then we also created the 7950 inline automatic air vent. We had a contractor come to us and say they weren't exactly sure where they were going to locate the product. They wanted some flexibility of putting it in line to create an artificial high point in the system. So as you see there, the inlet and the outlet are the same size, but in the center we have increased the diameter to make a trap chamber, and we have a little air scoop in the device. So any air that migrates up through the system after you've initially purged all the air out will go into this higher volume chamber in the product and be exhausted out through the air vent. We do offer both mechanical as well as electronic sensing devices that you can locate on our air vents to tell you if they're working properly. We offer the 7920 AI that this device is a carryover from our collect and drain product line, and this attaches directly to the outlet of the air vent, and the air will release out of this, and if there is any failure in the air vent working properly, it will chirp and blink and tell you to come service it. We offer that as an electronic option, and then we offer a mechanical option with our 7925. This will give you a visual indication that the air vent is not working properly and needs some maintenance. We offer a product we call the Validator, and this device actually gives you a methodology to push air backwards through our product to test that our air vent is working properly, and will help be in compliance with the NFPA 25-2023 requirement for making sure your air vents are working properly. Moving on to how do I tell if I have a corrosion problem? So the air vents help us stop having a corrosion, but if you've had any type of corrosion related event and pipe failure, it was recommended to us that we create a device that would tell people they're about to have a corrosion problem before the actual water damage event. So NFPA 13 has gotten much more, the chapters associated to the quality of how the water is both supplied to a system and maintained in a system have increased each year. And now number 4, install a corrosion monitoring station. So this gives you some confidence that the water in your system is not eating through the pipe. So we make the model 7700 and 7800 Core Insight corrosion monitor. This simple sight glass device is installed so that if the part that's in the system shows any type of corrosion and it has air or water that due to corrosion gets into the unit, it changes the sight glass on the outside of the pipe to bright orange. So we make it for both new and retrofit construction, offering it both a pipe spool as well as for application onto a mechanical tee. But how the unit works is it's a hollow chamber. The end of the unit, which is down in the system, is machined down to be 1/3 the thickness of Schedule 10 pipe. So when that area, if there's any type of corrosion event and that chamber, air or water comes into that chamber, it changes the sight glass on the outside of the pipe to bright orange. These are located in strategic locations around the building, from the inbound supply to is somewhere in the center of the building off of sectional floor controls or cross mains. We recommend that if you're putting it on a wet system, you just put it in at the top of the clock, but not 12 o'clock where it would be above the system. And if you're putting it in on a dry or pre-action system, you put it into, again, the sidewall of the pipe. That's the critical thing. Now, wanted to get through, we've gone through corrosion protection, freeze protection. The last part of this presentation, and I'm just finishing up now, is our training module. We offer a variety of training like we're doing right now with this webinar. We offer in-person training at our facility just outside Philadelphia. We do half-day, full-day, and multi-day training on all aspects of life safety systems. We do these online as well. We have this training facility in conjunction with General Air Products. It's probably the country's largest manufacturer of air compressors for dry and pre-action systems, as well as nitrogen generators for corrosion protection on dry systems, and then their dry air pack, which you see in the center picture there. In addition to all of the AGF products and General's products, we also have the various devices made by the other sprinkler head manufacturers and sprinkler alarm valve manufacturers, both wet and dry valves from 4 or 5 of the other manufacturers. We have fire pumps and actual backflow preventing there. So we can cover all gambits of the fire sprinkler industry, both wet and dry. We've become one of the largest training centers on the East Coast. For specific information about AGF manufacturing, you can go to our website, agfmfg.com, to get drawing files, pre-written specifications, and technical details on all of our products. And this covers the gamut. I tried to get right at 45 minutes for my presentation, and I'm at 44 minutes. So, Ann, I don't know if you can jump back on to this. I think there may have been a few questions asked.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me, Jim?
I can, and I apologize earlier about the technical difficulty we had there, and that was our fault, and I apologize about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad we were able to get back on. So no problem. I want to thank you for the presentation, of course, and for covering a lot of ground there and tackling some of the issues around sprinkler systems that I'm sure many in the audience, oversee on a regular basis. So thank you again, Jim, and thank you for you in the audience. Please do send in your questions at this time, and we will have some back and forth till the close of the hour. So, Jim, yeah, I do want to I will go back quickly to the corrosion monitor, the Core Insight, since that was something that maybe work backwards a little bit, since you had just touched on that a few minutes ago. I see there it's for new construction or retrofit. So the question we have coming in is, does the corrosion monitor from AGF require power? How does that work in terms of a retrofit or even new construction? But I think the question is more around a retrofit and what the power requirements might be, if any.
Uniquely enough, it does not require any form of power. That was one of the design criteria, because people did not want to have to pull additional wiring and connection to this product. So that's why we made it passive, in the fact that it's a sight glass. When air or moisture enters the chamber due to corrosion, it changes the element that's built into the sight glass, which is visible on the outside, to bright orange. So it does not require any form of power for the unit to be monitored, just requires visual inspection. So how we see customers utilizing this is they are putting them right at their inbound water supply, and then they're putting them in some strategic locations that are visible around the property. And then during their annual inspection, they just write down a note that if it is still indicating as clear, or if it has turned bright orange. So if it has turned bright orange, then there's little instructions written on the side of the unit that tells you that you've lost a third of the wall of your pipe. And in working with steel pipe manufacturers, they said if you can if you can address the corrosion problem in the first third of the pipe, then you can salvage that pipe. So that's why we made this the dimensions we did, to give you as early warning as possible that you are having a corrosive condition in your sprinkler pipe. It could be you could have MIC, the microbial influenced corrosion. That could be what's causing the problem. It could be some other defect in the pipe. It could be even some other contaminant in the water is accelerating the corrosion, or it's accelerating the corrosive ability in the pipe. And the goal would be to give you as early warning before you get to pinhole leaks, because as in talking with numerous customers around the country with these, if we get to the point that someone has pinhole leaks, well, that system has already been ruined. That pipe is already damaged beyond the point of repair. If you have pinhole leaks in the pipe, the only solution currently allowed for fire sprinkler piping is to remove that section of the pipe until you get to satisfactory wall thickness. that area of NFPA 13 is growing by leaps and bounds in complexity, from visual inspection of the system, obstruction inspection, to what is the acceptable wall thickness of the pipe, the expected longevity. All of that is growing. It seems every year they add, another 5 or 6 pages to that chapter in NFPA 13 dealing with corrosion. And these core insights were one of the first products they're a simple solution. There certainly are powered corrosion detecting products that are thousands of dollars. We wanted to make a product that was a little bit more simplistic and cost effective, because then people would hopefully put them in and then use these. I hate to make the simple analogy, but if and this maybe date some people listening, if you can think about the old oven stuffer roasters, like if the little white thing pops, it tells you that the system's cooked, the turkey's cooked. Well, that same thing would be happening here. Oh, somebody took over my computer again.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Jim. I'm going to, while we figure that visual out, I'm going to just move ahead with questions. Yep. So does the core insight have a Schedule 40 pipe option is the question.
So if you had a Schedule 40 system, we would be approximately 20% of the wall thickness of the pipe. That's how I would explain to somebody looking at the unit. So we are not determinant on the schedule of the system. The core insight always has a fixed end. It's always going to be a 0.12 wall thickness at the end of the unit, which is a third of Schedule 10 or 20% of Schedule 40. It will work in either system.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then the next question I have is, does the core insight only show the corrosive elements within the pipe it's attached to, or is it something that can detect within the whole of the system? So, to rephrase that as well, it's what is the span of the one core insight unit, I guess would be the question as well.
Well, typically you're going to be locating, if I had a 5-story office building, I'm probably going to have 3 or 4 of these located. One by the inbound water supply, somewhere around the alarm valve. I'm going to have maybe on floors 2 and 4 at the sectional floor control, and then maybe one towards the end of the system. And that's going to give me good representative samples of both the quality of the pipe as well as the condition of the water in the system. Very rarely do we see, say, spot corrosion to a specific floor of a building, unless it's a trapped air situation. So when we see corrosion-related damage, it's typically widespread throughout a building, and again, it's due to either the condition of the water or the overall condition of the pipe. So having a few of these located around the building gives us the best indication of the quality of the system and the quality of the water.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stay on the corrosion topic because we do have several questions that have come in. So we're just going to keep on that before we jump to a different area, just for everyone else in the audience as well. Just so you know, and please do send in your questions if you have any in the audience. So Jim, the next one that's come in is, you were talking about inspection. So will yearly inspections reveal corrosion? Is that something that you could comment on?
So yearly inspections, depending on what's being performed. So NFPA 25 has a very specific list in cycle of what you have to do on a system based off its occupancy and based off the system's design criteria. NFPA 25 mandates in cycle maybe once every 3 years, 5 years, every 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Different things have to be checked, from system pressure to making sure you don't have any type of obstruction, to so all different aspects of both wet, dry, and pre-action systems have to go through the cycles of NFPA 25, what they mandate. On an annual basis, we recommend, because each of the core insight plugs is dated, and there's a date stamped into the units of when that unit, and what we recommend is you have the date that the unit is stamped. If you were to utilize, say, our mechanical T version, the coupon that you would cut out of the pipe, we have a little notch in the product to attach the coupon to the core insight, and that would become kind of your test device. So you would know, here's the pipe when it was brand new and installed at this location. Okay, now my core insight is indicating that I've lost a third of the wall thickness. So I just measured, I just literally deduct one from the other, and that tells me what I have in remaining pipe. So from an annual inspection, the minimum we recommend is that you visually look at the core insight to see if it's turned orange or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And one last on that angle. Are there any recommended solvents to minimize corrosion? Is that something that you also might want to comment on?
So that is a very touchy subject in the fire sprinkler industry, because the use of any form of corrosion inhibitor or solvent or cleaning solvent, they have tried over the years to introduce different chemical process to both cleaning the sprinkler pipe prior to its installation and service, or to mitigating any type of corrosion into the system. And I would say round one of those products that were introduced to the sprinkler industry did not go well. They did not play well with other items in the system. You have to remember, in a fire sprinkler system, besides the steel pipe, you also have the sprinkler heads themselves, and then you have a variety of other devices, and you have different metals and different materials. There may be some vinyl plastics like the paddles of a flow switch. So you have different elastomers are on these systems from how they're connected. And what they discovered is chemical-based inhibitors were not well received initially. Now, I do know a company, Huguenot Industries. Huguenot has been far and away out front of leading the industry and has gotten approval that UL and FM, like I talked about, the guiding lights, they're guiding inspection regulation firms for the fire sprinkler industry. They have gotten approval on a chemical inhibiting system. But to the best of my knowledge, Huguenot Industries is the only company that offers any form of chemical-based inhibitor.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for
Sure.
tackling that question. Appreciate it. So then we'll switch gears quickly. We have time for just a few more questions. And Jim, this is about actually the training that you mentioned at the end of the presentation that AGF does put out. And the question from one of our attendees is, where can he locate a list of the training that you offer at your location? And additionally, is your training recognized for CE requirements?
So yes, if you go to our website, the agfmfg.com, you'll find a tab link for our AGF University. And on that link, you can submit what you're looking for. We offer a variety of different training. We have what we would call kind of a speed training, where we do a 15-minute, 6-slide presentation of one specific product. That we also offer 1-hour CEU accredited classes, such as I'm doing right now, where we cover a variety of topics. Then we have, I'm doing one in 2 weeks that's actually a 4-hour code intensive one that's used for NICET training. So we offer a variety of different approval training levels. So that's on one aspect of it. We do combined training, where we do, say, AGF takes a certain quantity of time, a half an hour or 45 minutes, and then we bring in other industry partners like General Air Products. And so we are gonna, when we do that a lot with General Air, we train on all things AGF and all things General in a 1-hour window. We will do that for one person up to an unlimited audience like yourself. We do it for like some offices have us do it. We have a program that we coordinate through Grubhub that we deliver breakfast and lunch to the recipients of the presentation, and then you just listen to me while you eat. So we do offer a very wide range of choices for classes. In addition to what we offer, they are our industry partners such as Viking. Viking is one of the largest manufacturers of sprinkler heads and devices in the industry, sold throughout the world. They have a learning studio that is slowly but surely becoming the industry recognized standard. They teach on all things Viking, of course, but they are rolling in the educational content that their partners put out. So they are pulling in our class material into their learning studio so that you could go there and learn about all things wet, dry, and pre-action, foam systems, special hazards and such, as well as all the different products that we make that coordinate with those systems.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for that overview. I imagine that many in the audience will benefit from that, and of course, encourage everyone to look into that if that is something you're looking for. Okay, I think we have time for, let's say, one last question if we can squeeze it in. And I do appreciate everyone sending in their questions. If Jim is not able to get to your question, please be assured he will be able to answer it offline if you're looking for further info.
Yeah.
But so Jim, I'll pose this to you. Let's see. Are there any California State Fire Marshal listing numbers on the Core Insight product and venting product?
There is not on the Core Insight product. There's literally no standard that California State Fire Marshal could apply to the Core Insight device. It is somewhat unique in its function and nature. So there, to comply or to submit to the California State Fire Marshal, which we have on all of our other products, you typically have to correlate that to a UL and FM standard guideline. And Core Insight is one of those unique products that does not really have a standard for us to comply with, since we're the ones that created it. So unfortunately, no, there's not a specific California State Fire Marshal for Core Insight, but there is on the rest of our products.
Okay, thank you. And I am going to just try to squeeze in one more question, Jim, and then
Sure.
we will close it out. And thanks again, everyone, for your attention as well. And just it's kind of cycling back to the flood eliminator.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave this question out since it was toward you were talked about the Texas situation with the freeze situation, of course, a situation that has been faced other places as well, and we hope to prevent, of course. So the question is, can the flood eliminator be used on nitrogen systems? I believe that there was talk about the air systems, but can you talk about any nitrogen systems and the application there, if any?
Yeah, the flood system will work with standard compressed air, provided by any type of compressor that typically are found on fire sprinkler systems.
Okay.
And it isn't impacted by the ones that have added nitrogen generating systems. It's there as a preventative measure that if you have a catastrophic activation of the system, it's going to slam close to prevent that major flooding event. I mean, Texas and what we saw happen in all those buildings all over the place, parking garages, individual, the residential environments where they had low point drains freeze and break and fall apart. They had 1 inch or larger flow of pipe, and it did millions and millions of dollars worth of damage. I can tell you personally, since we make a lot of these low point drain devices, it put us all back in the shop on almost a second shift, myself included. I was back in our production facility making these products for 2 or 3 weeks while we dug out of the problem that happened. The flood eliminator is just unfortunate timing that we did not have it fully ready, and we are a manufacturer that when we say something is available, like when we say, this is a new product, we don't tell anybody it's a new product until we actually have made the product and have it available. We didn't want to tell everybody and then sit on it. So the flood eliminator would have prevented a significant amount of what happened in the Texas issue with frozen and broken drum drips causing damage, because it would have slammed closed, and you just have that little drip of water coming out of it till somebody can get in there, turn off the water, drain the systems down, repair the pipe. And the minute you repair the pipe and repressurize the system full of air or nitrogen, the best thing about the flood eliminator, it just resets itself. It doesn't require any form of interaction in resetting itself. Just once the system repressurizes, it's spring loaded, it immediately goes back to its normal open position.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for expanding on that as well. We that. And I want to thank you, Jim. Looks like we're out of time. Thanks for taking all those questions and, of course, for your presentation. Thanks again.
And thank you, guys. We really appreciate the involvement of Group C Media and Facility Executive Magazine. Long-term, we've been long-term subscribers to it, and really think the world of it. Thank you for this great opportunity.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you, of course, to our audience for your attendance and for your questions and for keeping the discussion going as we talk about these issues. So I did want to mention that also that a recording of today's session will be available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com. It will also be available at Agf Manufacturing's website, and that's agfmfg.com. So please check them out as well for the recording in the near future, as well as for information on more information on what we've heard today. So thanks again. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.